So I'm going to tell you a story about me as a religious schizophrenic person, and how I got here, and how it somehow through sheer luck, and I overcome it. As in the past, I used to post vents, especially very violent and angry remarks against Christians and conservatives, which gotten some of my posts flagged and taken down, which I nearly lost my entire channel to this, and thank God that I stopped and developed a better mind state. And today I will show you how I became a Christian, then a person who negotiated with the voices and fails, and grew bitter, and was permanently scarred by it. And for many years of battle in a psych ward, and outside especially. Then after that I discovered someone who will help me overcome it, and here's my story. Also, a little trigger warning, there will be mentions of suicide and radical ideologies, and self-harm. So if you're not comfortable, I suggest you go. With that out of the way, let's proceed. It all started when I was around the end of 8th grade, when I stumbled upon a Christian channel by the name of AOC Network, which is basically an acronym for Ambassador of Christ, under a mental health video of Prince EA, basically interrogating depression, if he was a convicted criminal. And that spiraled me into a rabbit hole of Christian content, not the ones that tell you that God loves you the way to you, but a doomsday channel, emphasizing the last days, and how, if you don't believe in God, you will go to hell, and that narrative caused me immense frustration, which led me to leave the circle entirely. I also developed along the way talking to God through the wind, and how if the wind blows he said yes, and if not, he said no, and somehow the wind gave me signs that he is here and present. Eventually, I developed a sense that Satan talks to me, laughing and scoffing at me through loud cars that would pass by our house, by rich folks, with luxury cars, representing their greed. All that within just a few months of being in Christianity was all that it took to completely reshape my life for the worse. Also, when I discovered that I was transgender as a biological boy and some conflicting beliefs about my transgender identity made me completely ditch the whole religion as a whole. I even kept a notebook from my fear of God, which later I forgot, reminding myself to never join Christianity. B. Never mock God, which I later failed. C. Have gratitude and become a woman one day if possible. But that promise was short-lived, as every time I went outside and the wind came I felt like God was urging me to return. Eventually, it became more violent, with the wind becoming stronger, which my brain thought God was now officially after me. When I was in 9th grade, it was a rough battle. I attempted suicide many times at the lowest point in my life. I also grew more bitter towards my parents, and that turned to be a turning point, as that morning I was desperate. And I then said something that I had attempted suicide before. That resulted in me being turned in to my guidance counselor, where I told my entire story, which they called my dad, and they sent me to be analyzed by the hospital, where, during that car ride, I felt vulnerable and open. My dad even cried, realizing that I have not been intentionally trying to piss him off, but I'm deeply hurt. When I got discharged, I soon was hit with a massive storm that night, and I couldn't sleep, feeling like God is punishing me, and I was in total rage and fear, unable to rest. It took what I believe was my mom's prayer to calm God down at that time. And that night was a night that I will never forget. Soon, the next day, as my mom and sister were walking around Flushing trying to find a therapist for me, I was in a great mood in Flushing. The wind was calm and I daydreamed often as a leisure to pass time while we walked, and I loved walking around my previous hometown Flushing. Eventually that moment was short-lived, as 2 days later when the wind came on my way home from school, I feel angry, and I was screaming angrily, which my parents heard it, and immediately sent me back to the hospital where they diagnosed me with schizophrenia. I was put on a 72-hour hold in that hospital, and I was later transferred to a psych ward where I recovered. I met many friends, and I had a good time. It wasn't until another outburst that I broke, and they put on me on higher drugs to calm me down, which made me tired all the time and low energy, and I blamed it on how I was secluded from the outside world that I was in that state, which I was dead wrong. At that time, I was terribly homesick and desperately wanted to get discharged, and when I did, I felt nothing different and realized it was the meds. Eventually, I found out that my favorite creator mocked God, which I was devastated by, and her name is Jaden Animations. I continued to grow depressed even more. And the fact schoolwork was piling up on me made me even more miserable. I have a deep-rooted parasocial relationship with her, and that would be in itself another video. And yes, I acknowledge it was all my fault. I was able to get an outpatient treatment with an old lady, therapist, which I didn't relate to but went ahead anyway because I didn't want to bother anyone. My first medication was risperidone, and it made me tired and drowsy. It worked for a while until it stopped working around 10th grade, when my doctor switched towards olanzapine, which made me hungry and tired, and I only took it during nighttime. It worked for it until it stopped around the end of 10th grade, where I started hearing voices again. I was at another low point in my life, thinking this was a way of God trying to stop me from not being able to hear his voice defying his order. Even after many meds, it didn't work. It was frustrating at the same time, terrifying, worsening everything by 11. Until tomorrow, where it was our class's concert band show where we played that, slightly showed me that God isn't against me. And later, looking back, I realized that it was another peaceful moment of my life that I should cherish. I did poorly on it, but my whole class carried the show, which I'm happy about. We later ate out with my dad, and I'm also glad that my little sister liked the K-pop show shown previously. But the road ahead was difficult. I endured voices after voices with my meds unable to work. My dad also refused to send me back, when I begged him to send me back to the psych ward, saying that they will keep me there forever if he sends me there, which is total nonsense. And years later, in senior year of high school, when we all moved to a new house to Forest Hills, and the voices calmed down for what I remember, and my grandparents came to America from China, I was able to settle down from what I remember. The people in my new school were very kind to me, and I made a lot of friends out of nowhere. I guess of my kind aura of helping others, that I got all these friends. Oftentimes when I come home, the wind was blowing heavy, and I often freak out doing my same routine of damaging property, and my grandparents and my little sister restraining me down, stopping me and comforting me as I gotten extremely angry. I always, since the voices, I posted angry vents that nearly got my channel terminated. I often associate this time to be a turning point as when I banged my head and ripped bushes. I scratched my hands and it was bleeding as well as my forehead. That is when my dad decided that enough is enough, and sent me to the hospital again, many times. When I was there, I was placed at Zuckerberg Hillside Hospital, and I honestly thought at first I was going to get discharged and never recover. They tried many meds, like Abilify, and eventually the strongest antipsychotics, like clozapine, which ended me up at another hospital due to heart problems with my meds. When I was at another hospital, I desperately wanted to go back to Zucker, because I was bored as hell. They're just a TV and a enclosed room. I get to walk in the halls. And I was nice to the staff there as usual, for my nice demeanor. At that time, in that hospital, I was scared on the inside, feeling like my channel has been terminated as I gotten 2 strikes, and I posted a graphic drawing of my hands and forehead, which YouTube didn't take down till this day. Luckily, I was able to receive news early that my heart was in good condition and able to get discharged. Then they put me on Devopro and haloperidol. My family also visited me, and my dad especially was extremely worried and relieved, and it helped me with my boredom. But I had to wait for an available bed, which took days. And on that day, I was often confronted by the voices telling me discouraging things. One time, it made me question my trans identity. It made me anxious and in fear of myself, and questioning everything, unwilling to give up this, and it got to a point where I formed a delusion that God is correcting my heart in this hospital and I wouldn't be discharged until I can change. On that day, I told the nurses I wasn't okay, and they comforted me. Anna even asked what pronouns I want to go by, which I told them, he, she. I also managed to see my channel on YouTube thanks to a computer I borrowed from my nurses, which it is still there. And the post is still there, and soon stumbled upon a video by Chupumballs. A video about depression, which I thought God was talking to me this way, and I even told the nurses, who majority of them are Christian, that God is talking to me like this. Which he said, yes. And I finally got discharged. I arrived back excited and eventually no different. I learned a lesson that the best feeling in the world isn't the destination but the journey to it. When I got there, and I meet a new roommate, who just arrived, let's call him Sam. So Sam, just like me, has also been struggling with schizophrenia, and has been on many medications before, and almost all of them had failed. I also meet other patients who also had similar experiences with medications, and all this made me feel less alone, and made the voices feel less powerful and significant. I still had occasional voices from there instilling doubts, and there is one time I started seeing things, and things that aren't there, and I wondered, when will this stop? When this is happening, it is closer to my discharge date, which made me worried and pessimistic as I am a very pessimistic person. At that time, I thought this was God again, trying to correct my heart and rid my trans identity. But luckily, my doctors told me that I am well functioning, and that my outpatient treatment would take care of it with the meds and stuff. But luckily, thank God I felt better when my discharge date came. At that point, I finally had a positive outlook on God. At that time, I made many friends who supported me, and I spent a total of 2 months there, far exceeding every stay I had previously in a psychiatric hospital as for right now. Instead of viewing God as a ruthless man like Gendo from Evangelion, or a dictator alien empire, like the Combine from Half-Life, he's a morally complex man. My dad took me out for a meal, and I finally enjoyed it after losing weight from the boring hospital food I was given. But eventually I gotten bored of home, and I realized a lesson from my previous experience in the psych ward in the hospital. It's the journey that brings the most joy, not the destination. And from there, I continued to battle schizophrenia till this day, with setbacks and anxiety as well as victories. So, I want to tell you guys that I still have my friends' phone numbers on my phone. I have also been doing pretty well. Just school is starting tomorrow for me to make up the past times. I haven't gone to school, so wish me luck and may the universe bless you.